Hey, this is Your Band is a Business. I'm Cornelis, and this is the place where I discuss the day-to-day realities of being an independent musician. Today, I want to talk about stage rage, which is when musicians lose their temper, fly off the handle, smash equipment, attack the audience, and storm off stage, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I want to talk about it from the perspective of being a musician ourselves and all the different emotions that we experience as a musician, trying to make it, or during a gig or after a gig, things like post gig blues, all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of emotions that we experience as musicians, and we'll talk about that, basically how to manage that. So it's all prompted by what's been going on at Coachella Festival. So apparently David Albarn from Blur threw a tantrum on stage. I read an article about that, but he was having a go at the audience because they weren't singing along, and some musicians smashed a guitar. I don't know if that was done as part of the performance or if that was out of frustration. And then apparently Grimes was shouting and swearing, and it had something to do with some equipment malfunction. Now, I've never had a true moment of stage rage. I've never smashed my guitar or anything like that, but I've definitely had some uncharacteristic feelings of anger or frustration as a musician in general or on stage. And yeah, so why does this happen? I think a lot of people would think of me as being someone that doesn't really have a temper. I don't get angry quickly. I'm quite even keeled in terms of my emotions. But here's the thing: obviously I'm very, very passionate about music. It's so important to me, and the life of a musician, at least mine, and let me know if you feel the same, is of constant frustration. And that starts when you first pick up an instrument, because you're not as good as you want to be, and then it takes a while to get decent at your instrument, and then you think to yourself, oh, I can't write good songs, so that there's a frustration there. And then why can't I find other musicians to play with, and why can't I get gigs? And it's just constant, like, frustration, frustration, frustration all the time. I'm experiencing it right now today, actually, because I've been offered a gig, but the drummer can't do that day. So like, I want to play a show at this venue. Yeah, so that's the life of a musician: constant frustration. And yeah, sometimes in certain situations, this frustration can boil over, as it were. And I think what happens when you're on stage, and this can be at an open mic night in a small pub in front of 10 people, or it can be at a huge festival in front of thousands and thousands of people. I think what happens is that uh, I'll use a music production analogy, as it were. So you know you have limiters and compressors to keep the sound in check, as it were. When you're performing on stage, those get taken off. No compression, no limiters. Your emotions are heightened. You've got adrenaline pumping through your system, and you're just fully energized. And yeah, everything, all your emotions are dialed up extreme. And so what happens, I think, is that things can set you off, and then you just fly off the handle in a way that you might not necessarily do in day-to-day life. And I think sometimes you read about people that play sports that in day-to-day life are just really nice, normal people, but then on the field they turn into like these borderline criminals with that are like hacking and kicking and punching their way through the game. And I'm talking about, team field sports. I'm not talking about MMA. Um, Although maybe that's the same as well. MMA fighters during the daytime, they're really nice people, and then they get in the octagon, and something just possesses them. But anyway, I can somewhat identify with that. As I said, there's this constant little frustrations, that we're experiencing as a musician. It's not a smooth and easy ride. There's all these like hurdles that we're constantly overcoming. Then you get on stage and those compressors and limiters are off because you're trying to put all your emotions into the music, as well as that you've got all this adrenaline pumping through you, and then little things can just trigger you sometimes. And like I said, I've never really experienced true stage rage, as it were. And as well as that, my perspective is also always that I'm trying to learn from the situation or trying to win me over. So, for example, I don't personally, on the whole, I don't mind playing in a pub where there are people having a conversation, but then sometimes people are being deliberately obnoxious, where they are heckling you, or they walk in front of the stage and on their phone, just stuff like that. And then, woo, my blood starts boiling all of a sudden. And on the one hand, you could say, well, yeah, that's a totally normal reaction. And of course it is. But for me, what's interesting is how quickly, like, that emotion of anger just like spikes out of control, whereas normally I'm the kind of person that will it kind of, have like a smooth slow gradation of my anger. But being on stage with all the adrenaline, suddenly I just like, wow, just get really angry. um and I've always managed to keep that in check, but I've seen people, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, people just like start shouting at the audience, or just storm off, just like pull the cable out of their guitar and just storm off stage, that kind of stuff. So yeah, what am I saying? I'm saying, on the one hand, it is an understandable and legitimate feeling to have. Like if people are disrespecting you to the point where standing in front of stage on their phone, or heckling you, or shouting requests, or just being obnoxiously loud with their with their talking. Because yeah, so at an open mic night, there's people in the pub and they're having a conversation. I mean, obviously you would like them to be quiet, but sometimes people just start talking and laughing naturally. But personally, one of my pet peeves is when my fellow musicians, some of them, are just on the side of the room sitting there, and they're just talking and laughing. And I know there's people that are sitting there playing cards. I'm like, dude, come on. I sat there and watched you perform, and now you're there playing cards. It's yeah, it gets frustrating. Anyway, so yeah, those are legitimate feelings to have. I think what you have to be aware of is, okay, I'm in this heightened state, and I could experience something a bit more extreme than normal. Now, on top of that, what's going on maybe if you've had a couple of drinks, for example, and then your inhibitions are even more loosened. So that's something to take into account. Now, personally, I'm not a big drinker anyway, and when I perform, I tend not to have a drink before I sing because it just affects my throat and I don't like the feeling. So that's never really been an issue for me, but it could be something to think about for yourself. If you are having uh, an issue with this, then you might have to think, okay, maybe I shouldn't have alcohol before I perform, because it's just gonna not only interfere with my performance, perhaps, but also make me so uh, emotionally heightened, however you want to, I don't know how to put it, that you could fly off the handle and do something you will regret later. In general, as a musician, as I said, there's a lot of frustration that we experience as a musician, but there's heightened emotions in general. And something that happens after a gig is that we suddenly get this withdrawal, and this is where sometimes people talk about post-gig blues, where you suddenly feel really bad. And I believe this is because literally you've been pumping full of adrenaline and whatever hormones that make you feel really hyper and good, and then suddenly you get those all sucked out of you, and you're literally having some kind of come down you're experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and you can feel really down about yourself. So, and I've experienced this. Like I've just performed and I did quite well, and then I just afterwards I just think, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? I've no fans really. I mean, I've got a couple of people that like my music, obviously, and I really appreciate that. But this is the post gig blues, right? You think, oh, what am I doing with my life? Why am I why am I doing this? No, it's all pointless. And then maybe you've got some journey home where you're driving through the rain or have to get a bus or something like that, and you can feel really down about yourself. Now, I've learned that this is just a temporary thing. Usually after like an hour or an hour and a half or so, I come out of it again and I feel okay. But in the beginning I didn't know what was going on really. And I think, this is the classic reason why rock stars take a lot of illegal substances or legal substances as well after a gig, because they've been on this rush for a couple of hours on stage, and then there's this massive come down. So like, how do you fight that? Well, you start taking substances to keep that high going, but that's obviously not a good healthy lifestyle, physically and mentally, to have like these ups and downs and to self-medicate. So anyway, I'm not gonna, I don't want to be the psychologist or the psychiatrist here too much. So if you obviously if you have real anger episodes or depressive episodes, then you should speak to a professional, speak to a doctor. But I think, yeah, a lot of us, um, as I said, we have these day-to-day frustrations as a musician, all these little roadblocks and hurdles that we're constantly trying to overcome. And then when something new gets added in, it's like, it's so frustrating. Then on stage we're experiencing heightened emotions, so we might act in a way that we normally wouldn't. And obviously we have to stand up for ourselves, and people shouldn't be disrespecting us by, as I said, standing in front of stage and talking loudly over us when we gave them the courtesy of listening to them, all that kind of stuff, and we should call that out. um, I personally don't do too much of that from the stage, unless yeah, no, I've done it a couple of times when it's really obnoxious. I'm like, hey guys, stop shouting, stop laughing so loudly. You can go to the other room, or you can go to the back room or whatever, or go outside. I've certainly done that, but on the whole, I try to win people over and win people's attention over with my music. And in terms of the post gig blues, I've learned to just ride it out, and I don't immediately. As I said, I'm not a big drinker anyway. If I do have a drink, it will be after my performance. But I'm very conscious that I'm not trying to medicate myself. Where, oh, I feel bad, let me start having some drinks. No, that that feeling will go away after an hour or so. Uh, but yeah, just I'm just aware of it, and then having a drink is not. It's because I want to have a drink. It's not to like get myself out of this funk. Anyway, so those are some of my thoughts about stage rage, where it comes from, how to manage it, and some of the other emotions that we feel as a musician. So yeah, I'm interested to know what you think. Have you experienced stage rage? Have you ever smashed an instrument? Have you ever attacked somebody from the audience or something crazy like that? And how do you deal with the post gig feelings, the post gig blues? Are you aware that that it could be because your hormones and your emotions are really heightened because of the situation? um, or do you think there's something deeper going on? Because if that's the case, obviously they need some professional help. Anyway, yeah, I'm interested to hear about your experiences. Let me know in the comments, and I'll speak to you guys next time.